to see the way that they messed up and the way that the puppeteers were absolutely brutal with each other in terms of just not lending a hand at all. There's this great moment between Frank Oz and John Stone, who's the original director, in an interview. And he says, you would think you would sort of help out when you see somebody having trouble, but you just wait and you just let it just dig in. And they were brutal, and it's really shows the love and the camaraderie that everybody had.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Variety's virtual Sundance studio. I'm Mark Malkin, Variety's senior culture and events editor, and I am here with the team behind Street Gang, How We Got to Sesame Street. How do you even start to try to take the history of Sesame Street that's this long and forever and bring it down to a documentary?
You're right. This is such a vast story. I mean, this program has been on TV for 52 years now. But for us, we decided to make our focus the very beginning, the first 20 years, which is still a vast, vast story. And we decided to concentrate on the people that originated Sesame Street, the small gang of artists and writers and educators who brought this show to life. And by doing that, and by concentrating on building it out initially from 3 people, Joan Ganz Cooney, John Stone, and Jim Henson, we were able to have a starting point that was very, very rich, and we believe told the story beautifully.
We were very lucky, and we early on we got access from both Sesame Workshop and the Jim Henson Company to have access to their archives, which we joke that was a blessing and a curse. Because going back to your question about how do you do this film with so much material, there was so much. We were like kids in a candy store, really, just taking a look at these amazing archives of things that hadn't been seen in a very long time.
Trevor, what was one thing that came across your desk from the archives that you were just like, oh my God?
I think it's really the outtakes. I mean, that's one of the things where I think you sort of really feel what it was like to do the show. I remember times at Sesame Workshop where Ellen and Marilyn and I were literally swimming through a sea of photos. And to have that kind of archive, as Ellen said, is hard, but also it helps to sort of focus you, because as this story is evolving and developing, and we're putting these different interview subjects together and these pieces together, it then starts to become clear about that the origin is really the story that no one knows. And that was the thing that struck me so much with Michael Davis's book that we optioned, was just how much we didn't know about Sesame Street. It's an institution now, but back then, and as our movie really shows, it was this ragtag group of people that really did something that was, a total experiment.
The fact that the writing was so sophisticated, the comedy was really aimed at adults. And, there's so many things that are not in the movie that were amazing. Also, the fact that it hit such political nerves when it came out, that it was banned in the South because of the integrated cast. The fact that, certain puppets were hitting nerves was a big deal when he first came out. And I originally thought that the white parents were being offended by Roosevelt because his vernacular was so Black, but it was so interesting to see that it was the Black parents that were taken aback. So this little show aimed at preschoolers hit such nerves in the society at large. And that's when you have something that's really working, that's really connecting with people. This film tells all of these little stories that nobody knows about Sesame Street. We love the fact that we're unveiling all these little nuggets of history that are so fun.
And actually, if you watch the footage in its entirety, at one point we're like, we want to play all of this because it's truly shocking, and especially because they go to the children and they ask the kids what they want to see, right? And the kids want to see Sesame Street. That's the show they like the best. So we really get that statement that it's the adults, that are causing the biases and the things that are shaping children's minds. And so here was a show that was intentional about that. We're going to create a street that we want the world to look like. You know, we want to make sure that there are all races, all colors. You know, we want to make sure that we are representing. And, you know, we talk a lot about that with representation, because that's something we say now, but it was something they did. They hired community organizers. We get to touch briefly on Evelyn Davis, who was a community organizer they hired to ensure that they were reaching out to, you know, communities of color, and that they were actually making something that served the community they were trying to serve.
And I think one of the things that's interesting about those sort of original tenets of Sesame Street, that was really as I see it, the structure of how all children's television now functions. You know, PBS has a curriculum. Sesame Street had a curriculum. These original ideas and core values that Sesame Street built back in '69 are still true in the show today, but it's rippled out to so much further of the rest of children's television that I think that's such a unique thing in our media overall, to have that kind of an impact for that long. And I think that the workshop knew that was also part of what we were trying to show, is that this was the beginning of pretty much children's television as we know it today.
Marilyn, why do you think Sesame Street has resonated for 52 years?
When it hit our airwaves, you know, back then it was a new voice that had never been heard. It was absolutely daring and fearless. And it was so experimental. You know, they called it, in the first 5 years or so, every script says Sesame Street, an experimental season 1, experimental season 2. These creative people were literally throwing stuff against the wall to see if it would stick. And I think that spirit has endured, but particularly back then. And I just want to say, it was the collective genius of many, many people. But I really, really am so happy to bring out the story of John Stone, who is somebody that no one knows who he is. People assume that Sesame Street was the brainchild of Jim Henson. And yes, Jim Henson brought in the Muppets, who are so beloved and were the stars of the show. But John Stone conceived of the stoop, the urban setting, cast the characters, the live action characters. He directed, he wrote. It really was his child. We were so lucky to get his 2 daughters to bring his story a little bit more to life, you know, how they remembered him as a father and how he felt about his work. So to me, that's really one of the most important facets of this film, is the story of John Stone.